Okay, so I see this thing all the time in my therapy clients, and let's be real, I do it too, where there's something that's really important to me, right? I have this goal that I really want to achieve, or maybe there's this like self-care thing that I know would feel good and I know it would help my health. Or maybe there's just a lot of items on my to-do list and I know it would feel really good to get them done. And I just can't. I just feel stuck. Like I want to do it, but I can't get myself to take that first step. Anyone else have this problem? Okay, so what if I told you that maybe this isn't actually a willpower issue? What if that wasn't a sign that you're just lazy or have a lack of motivation? What if I told you that there is a physiological explanation? So if you find yourself constantly feeling stuck, there's probably something going on with your nervous system. And if that's the case, this video will help. If you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Abby and I am a licensed professional counselor. I work as a psychotherapist who specializes in trauma, stress, and the mind-body connection. Talking about the nervous system is kind of my jam, and I created a method called SomaSong, which uses science, somatics, and singing to help people regulate their nervous systems for greater health and well-being. So in the last episode, we covered nervous system dysregulation and the window of tolerance, which are two foundational topics that pretty much set the stage for everything else we're going to be talking about, both in this video and the rest of this series. So I'll pop that video in the description box below. You can either pause, go back and watch that, and come back here if you'd like, or you can watch it at the end of this video if you missed it. So I'm going to pop a graph on the screen, and this graph very quickly represents some states of the nervous system. And if you look at that space in between the two lines there, that's called the window of tolerance. And the window of tolerance represents a regulated nervous system. This is the state that we want to be in most of the time. This is where we feel good. It's where we feel connected, grounded, where we feel like ourselves. Above the top line is called hyperarousal, or stuck on high. This is kind of like a state of fight or flight. It is a stress response. And in this state of stuck on high, we tend to feel a lot of high energy symptoms. And so what I mean by that is symptoms that are urging us toward action. Things like anxiety, stress, agitation, feeling like we can't sit still, feeling like our thoughts are racing, feeling like we have a lot of energy in our body, feeling like our muscles are tense, like we're breathing rapidly, like our heart is pumping, that kind of thing. So this fight or flight response was designed to help us take on threats. But there's this unfortunate mismatch these days where a lot of elements of modern life are triggering us to get into that fight or flight response when there is no physical threat. So our body is primed for action when there's no action that would necessarily be helpful. Okay, so moving to the other side of the window of tolerance, we have hypoarousal, or stuck on low. This is kind of the opposite. This is a shutdown or collapse response. It's an overwhelm response. It's a response that gives us low energy symptoms, kind of like a possum playing dead, okay? So we might feel numb, we might feel exhausted, we might feel disconnected, spacey, dissociative. Our bodies might feel heavy, we feel limp, that kind of thing. So if the fight or flight response is meant to mobilize us to take an action, right, to fight or to flee, this hypoarousal response is what happens when our brain and our body thinks that we probably can't survive the threat, right? It thinks that fighting it, probably not going to be successful. Running away from it, we might not have the time or energy. And so we're just going to shut down. We're going to play dead, hope that the threat leaves us alone. And or if we numb ourselves out, then we might not feel as much pain when the inevitable happens. So that's kind of the hypoarousal response at its core. Now, one of the number one questions that I get when I describe this framework is, can I be in both hypo and hyperarousal at the same time? And the answer is yes, definitely. This is super common. In fact, a lot of people have this all the time. And that's called the freeze response. So at its essence, freeze is a blended state where you are both hyper and hypoaroused at the same time. And these two opposing forces come together and lead to a sense of being stuck or frozen. Now, I just want to say that some people talk about hypoarousal as a freeze response, and different people use this terminology in different ways. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong, but I find it a lot more helpful to separate hypoarousal as a separate thing, collapse, shutdown, and freeze as a separate thing, that hyper and hypoaroused feeling at the same time. So going back to our analogy using animals, if fight is a predator animal, like a tiger or a lion, and flight is a prey animal, so thinking about like a rabbit darting away, and collapse or shutdown is that possum playing dead, freeze is like a deer in the headlights. So imagine that classic image of the deer in the headlights, right? Its muscles are tense, its eyes are wide, it's like staring at that car, and it looks so petrified, right? You can practically feel its heart rate pumping, you can practically feel the panic emanating from it, and yet it doesn't move. So that's very different from the possum who plays dead, right? The possum who plays dead is limp, it collapses. The deer in the headlights is tense. There is a lot happening under the surface. So just looking at an image like that, you can really sense there is an underlying activation, right? There is hyperarousal there, but there's something else that's preventing it from running away. So probably my favorite analogy to help people understand this is to imagine that you're driving a car and you decide, for whatever reason, to slam on both the gas and the brakes at the same time. So that's going to be very different than if the car were just in park, right? If you're slamming on the gas and the brakes, there is a lot happening. And yet the car isn't moving. From the outside, it's not going anywhere. There are these two opposite forces that are kind of fighting against each other, and the result is freeze. The result is being stuck. So in humans, the freeze response often shows up as this undercurrent of activation, this undercurrent of stress or anxiety or anger. But there's this frozenness, there's this inability to move or to act, so we feel stuck. So one way that this can show up is as procrastination. So maybe you're staring at this long to-do list, you know you have so much to do and it would make you feel so much better to just start working on it, and yet you're stuck. The more you look at it, the more anxious you get, and the more frozen you feel. Now that's kind of a day-to-day example of freeze. But I do want to mention that freeze is a very, very common response in the case of trauma. As people are experiencing something traumatic, it is extremely common for them to go into a freeze response. So like that deer in the headlights, having a car come right at you is very traumatic. The deer freezes. And I work with a lot of people who have experienced trauma, and something that's very common is people who did freeze during their traumatic experience often blame themselves. There's a level of shame or blame where people say, why didn't I run? Or why didn't I fight? Or why did I let that happen? And if that's your story, or a story that you were saying to yourself, I just want you to know from a mental health professional that the freeze response is not your fault. Freeze is a biological process. It is something that your nervous system did to try to protect you in some way, right? You didn't choose for that to happen. And so an important step toward healing is starting to try your best to let go of some of that self-blame, right? Starting to understand that that was a biological process and it's not your fault. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know that there are many people who need to hear that. So freezing up during a traumatic experience is an extreme version of the freeze response, right? Some people are literally frozen. They literally find themselves unable to move. But there are less extreme versions of freeze that a lot of people experience on a day-to-day basis. And there's this term called functional freeze that I actually really like. It's not a clinical term, you won't find it in the DSM or anything, but I think that it really gets at something. So in functional freeze, we are totally functional, right? We are functioning in our daily lives. We're going to work, we're going to school, we're doing the things that need to get done. Sometimes it can feel like we're only doing the bare minimum to be functional, and sometimes we're functioning at a really high level. But where the freeze part comes in is that we often feel like we are internally stuck. There is a stuckness within us. So for example, you might have some really important goals or some big dreams, and you know you want them and you know that they're important to you, but you just can't take that first step. Or you've tried to take a few first steps, but you kind of self-abandon, you kind of give up and you don't follow through. Or maybe you know that you're in a situation that's causing you problems, right? You're in a really stressful job, or you're in a bad relationship, or there's something about your life circumstances that you just know if you could change that one thing, it would be so much better. You would feel so much healthier and happier. And yet, you know this, you recognize the importance, and you're not making any steps to change. You're not making any steps to move. Or maybe you feel stuck in a healing process. Maybe you kind of know what you need to do to heal, either physically or mentally. You know that there are all these things that would be good for you, whether that's lifestyle changes like exercising more, getting better sleep, eating healthily, meditating, any of these things that we know are good for us, but we just can't get ourselves to do them. A lot of times I'll work with clients who have the tools and skills and they know what they need to do. The problem is just getting from theoretical understanding to actually using them. It's like part of you really wants to heal, but there's something stopping you. You feel stuck. And this stuckness is a classic freeze response, right? The gas and the brakes are going at the same time. Now, people can also feel stuck when they're in that collapse or hypoaroused response. But here's the main difference in my mind. With hypoarousal, you tend to feel pretty checked out. You tend to feel kind of numb, kind of lethargic, kind of ambivalent about the change. You might feel a little hopeless. There's not a lot of fire in you. It's like you feel too exhausted to even get yourself to care that much. In freeze, there tends to be a lot of internal tension. There is a very major part of you that wants to make those changes. There is a part of you that feels super anxious or stressed about the fact that you're not getting your to-do list done. Or there's a part of you that really, really wants to make those changes or work toward those goals. And then there's something that doesn't allow you to do that. So there's like this fighting internal tension happening. And it's so important to understand that freeze is not a sign of laziness or weakness. Freeze is a biological response. It's not that you're too lazy to meet your goals. It's that your nervous system is in a state of overwhelm, and maybe you just haven't yet found the right tools to move out of it. So if you take anything from this video, know that when you feel stuck, there is hope. There are tools, there are things that you can do. It's not your fault. It's your nervous system. So in the next episode, we'll discuss practical strategies for working with each of these nervous system states. What is one framework to help you choose the right tools to move from each of these states back into the window of tolerance? So if that sounds useful to you, which if you're a human with a nervous system, I hope it will be, please hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so that you don't miss the next episode. And if you'd like some more immediate tools to help you regulate your nervous system, I have several options for you. So if you're new to my channel or to this work, I am the creator of a method called SomaSong, which blends science, somatics, and singing to help you regulate your nervous system. Now, singing just happens to be one of the most effective nervous system regulation tools, so you do not have to be a singer to do this. This is for anybody. And there are several great options for trying out this method. This YouTube channel is a great place to start, so welcome, you're in the right place. But if you'd like to go a little deeper, I invite you to join our Substack community. So there is a free option. There's literally no downside to trying this out. It's just an additional resource to help you deepen your practice and join a like-minded community. For each of these videos, there's going to be a corresponding Substack article that helps you dive deeper into what we talked about. There might be journaling prompts, there might be exercises, there might be all kinds of things to help you deepen your practice and take it from theoretical to actionable. So you can find that info in the description box below. And if you're really ready to do a deep dive, I am working on a SomaSong for mental health course. It's going to be transformational in helping you regulate your nervous system to find greater health and well-being. So if you would like to be a part of the first cohort of this course, or you'd just like to learn more information about it, please feel free to join my waitlist. I'm going to determine the launch date of the course based on interest, so that waitlist really helps me know what you all are interested in and how much interest there is, and it's going to help me tailor the course to be exactly what you all want and need. The waitlist, of course, is free to join, so if you're interested, please go ahead and get on that list. And once you're on the list, I'll send you more info as the course is ready. So feel free to check any of those things out, and I look forward to seeing you next week as we talk about regulation. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or suggestions for content that you'd like to see here, please leave me a comment below and I will check it out. Have a good rest of your day or night, and I'll see you next time.